theoretical enjoyment to do what's right into the practical, and honor every Muslim by this act that he saved these people, many of whom were the ones who treacherously threw him out of his own land, out of his own homeland, ostensibly. And for this act, the French will actually award him many honors, and even Abraham Lincoln, who is a person, he's on the penny, and he's like a hero of America, whatever. I mean, you go too much into history and then people will always find something to say about everyone, but no one will say that Abraham Lincoln is not a person of great honor and repute in the history of America. He himself will write a letter of thanks and honor Abdul Qadir for that which he did on that day in protecting the Christians from the rioting Druze community. And there is actually a place, you can look it up, there's a place called El Qadir, Iowa. There's a city in Iowa that's named after him. Why? Because of that heroic act. It was something that was very well known and very respected at that time. The second person from the 19th century that I wanted to give as a reference is a commander, a Chechen commander by the name of Imam Shamil Dagestani. Imam Shamil is, and it's interesting, it's important that we talk about Chechnya. Why? Because these two young boys who are at the center of controversy in the Boston Marathon bombing, they're both of Chechen origin. The Chechen people have had a horrific history. Again, doesn't justify crimes that are committed, but it is important that we understand where people are coming from and what motives drive them to do what they do, even if we may agree that those motives are unacceptable. So this Imam Shamil Dagestani lives at the time when the imperialist Russian army is trying to take over their homeland in the Caucasus. These are lands that have been under Muslim rule for centuries, under the Ottoman Empire, and before that under the Seljuks and the Abbasid Empire, Dagestan being from the conquests of the first century of Islam. And so Imam Shamil, with a group of basically villagers, will for 20 years, depending on which historical source you read, between 4,000 and 6,000 villagers will hold off a imperialist czarist army of up to 200,000 soldiers from taking their homeland for decades. For decades. Every one of the soldiers who fights in his army are not only villagers, but they are people who are bay'ah with him. They are people who have taken the spiritual path of Sufism, of Islam from him at his hands, and they will receive religious instruction and spiritual instruction and martial instruction from him. They will fight until almost every one of them is decimated by the Tsarist army. And when Imam Shamil himself is finally caught, again, he will surrender, and they will say, we'll either execute you, or if you want to live, you have to sign an agreement that you're not going to fight us anymore. He will not only accept that agreement, he is given, because the Russian generals admire him so much, that how did such a simple and backwards man hold off our army for so many years? They will offer him a commission in the Russian army. Can you believe that? And he will refuse that. He will turn that down, and he will accept exile. He will go to Makkah Mukarramah, to the holy city of Makkah and the holy city of Medina, where he will live out his final days, and he will pass away over there. But again, the absence of total war. When you give your word for something, you stand by your word. And this is, again, in line with our our history of virtuous and chivalrous conduct in the face of military threat and in the face of physical conflict. I wanted to end my talk and transition into the question and answer period by giving two examples of people that, as a person who is someone of traditional classical madrasa, Muslim seminary training, I can tell you without any sort of two-facedness, this is not something that I'm saying to impress CNN or impress the public at University of Washington or impress anybody, as a very straight, matter-of-fact type of statement that don't embody this kind of chivalric and heroic virtue that we speak of from modernity, which people have confusion with, right? And which is played on by the media in order to get people afraid of an Islamic boogeyman. Muslims are human beings like everybody else. They're not unreasonable people. Unreasonable people do not create civilization. One is who Saddam. Saddam was a ostensibly Muslim ruler, Saddam Hussein of Iraq. Very few people understand this from the general public, but he and basically every other Arab ruler, non-monarchic Arab ruler, are secularists. They are open secularists. His Ba'ath Party is the sister party to the Ba'ath Party, which is running amok over Syria right now. And both of them are secularist parties. Both of them are people who are openly and avowedly anti-religion, be that religion Islam or whatever, and he will adopt the garb and don the guise of Islam near the end of his life more as a political stunt than any sort of true conviction. And anyone who is from Iraq will tell you that he was not a religious man, he wasn't a person who believed in religion. The second person is a very different person. The person is the person of Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was the person who does, appropriate for himself the guise of religiosity, and he will sport the outward signs of piety, like keeping a beard, like keeping traditional clothing, being punctual and offering his ritual prayers and in fasting, and using the speech of religious people. But what's different about him is that he is not a person who subscribes to any of our kind of traditional schools of jurisprudence or traditional schools of thought or even traditional schools of creed. And he will make statements like what? Like it is, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that it is unlawful to fight non-combatants. But because the American army is funded by taxpayers, and every American is a taxpayer, therefore every American is a combatant, and every American is a legitimate target. This is ridiculous. Has there ever been any army in the history of mankind that wasn't funded by taxes? No. This is a ridiculous line of argument. And this brings us again back to the point of total war. That people like Saddam, people like Muammar al-Gaddafi, people like Osama bin Laden and other people who have been a thorn in the side of the Muslims for far longer than they've been a thorn in the side of the West. And the Muslim community, the Muslim population has been suffering grief at the hands of these people in a modern political situation which is more akin to chaos than it is to order. These people have actually a lot more in common with the West than they do with our forefathers and with our forebears, from whom we take our tradition that we look to so proudly. And in this specific point, that they subscribe to the idea of total war. What is total war? Kick, tooth and nail, fight to the end, break whatever treaty, do what you need to do, take moral shortcuts, the acceptance of what they call collateral damage, which is a fancy way of killing innocent people for your own political means, which actually fits very nicely into what we use as the definition for the word terrorism. All of these things, they actually subscribe to them in the same way that modern standing armies subscribe to them. I'm an American, I was born and raised in America. If somebody wants to doubt my Americanness, that's their problem. It doesn't make me feel any less of an American or feel like I have to defend myself. But I'll tell you, it's part of our patriotic tradition in this country that when we see something that's wrong, we admit that it's wrong. And this is the same kind of terror-based policy for which we hate these people. This is the same terror-based policy that we're using in other countries. So you will see sanctions in Iraq. It's not killing the Ba'ath Party. It's not killing Saddam Hussein. It's not killing the wealthy. Who is it killing? It's killing children. It's killing cancer patients that require treatment because of spent uranium shells that we're using. It's killing the weak. It's killing the elderly. What's happening? There's drone attacks in the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. Those drone attacks have been literally killing for every one person that has even a shred of evidence of any connection between them and between any terrorist activity, that you can even open the discussion and talk about this person perhaps being a violent person or somebody who is of some sort of military interest. Literally, for every one person that's targeted, you will have 20 people killed in his wake. And that's after the State Department has defined a person of what you call a valid enemy target that's not collateral damage is any adult male, period. After that, still you were killing, our drones are killing so many children and women that it's something that it's a legitimate gripe and a legitimate grief and legitimate sadness that these people carry in their hearts against America. And you're not un-American by saying that. This is part of being an American, is calling these things out and saying, why are we doing these things? Why are these things being done in our name? And if you have any doubt about that, Pakistan had a landmark election that happened on Saturday. The party that will overwhelmingly win in the Northwest Frontier Province and will be elected in that province to the exclusion of all the other provinces is the only party that vows if we come into power, we will stop the permission that America has to launch drone attacks in our land. And this is something, this is serious, this is not a joke. We have to understand it from both sides. It's not anti-American to look at what things we're doing wrong and fix them. Rather, that's part of also being a good human being. Just like it's not being anti-Muslim, as a Muslim, to look at what bad things people are doing in the names of Islam and call them like you see them with courage and say, Osama is not a hero of the Muslims. Saddam is not a hero of the Muslims. Gaddafi is not a hero of the Muslims. And I'll admit this, if you ask the Muslim community here, nobody will touch these personalities with a 10-foot pole. But if you travel in depressed and oppressed parts of Africa and Asia, you will find people who hold these people in high esteem out of their own ignorance. Many of our ulama, many of the scholars of our sacred tradition have spoken out against such sympathies, including in many of the seminaries I studied in. But you'll see many of them are silent. Why? Out of fear of the repercussions that will come from the mass and the mob, that sometimes when they hear what they don't like to hear, they will act out in violent ways. And I think the way forward, both as Americans and as people in the Muslim world, all of us being human beings, the common way forward is what? Is to tap back into this ethical tradition that all of us have, whether it be as Muslims or as Christians or as humanists or as whatever tradition that we come from that grounds us in some sort of ethical behavior, that we tap back into it and we not be people of fear, we be people who call things the way that they are and the way that they see them. The idea is if you speak the truth, people will always oppose you. No person spoke the truth, whether it be a prophet of a tradition, of a religious tradition, or whether it be people of philosophical tradition, whether it be Socrates, whether it be any philosopher from any tradition that humanity holds in esteem. Nobody has ever spoken the truth in public except for it's caused them pain and grief. But brothers and sisters, I tell you, if you don't speak that truth and if you don't stand for that truth, even if the truth will cause you to lose your life, the life that you would have had without speaking that truth is not a life worth living. At least that's not what I see. And that's not what the finest of the human tradition is, and that's not what the finest of the Muslim tradition has to offer. So that's what I wanted to say on the topic. I appreciate your very long-suffering patience in hearing my speech. I was asked before opening the floor to questions and answers, and I'm told there are note cards and pens that people have been given. Is this true? Yes, no? Yeah? So please go ahead and write your questions. We'll have people coming through the aisles. Shunt the questions to the ends, and there'll be people coming through the aisles to collect your questions. In the meanwhile, while we go ahead and collect those and bring some of those questions forward. I was also requested by the MSA to promote tomorrow's event, which is also going to be here at 4:30 by the very learned and erudite Professor Jonathan Brown, who is basically in the field of Islamic studies, a very up-and-coming bright star in the Western academic field of Islamic studies. His foundational work on the Sahihain, on the authentic and canonical collections of prophetic tradition that the Muslims transmit, which form the kind of second most important textual source of law and ethics and spiritual practice for the Muslims after the Quran itself, is something that is has universal repute amongst the people of Western academia. So I encourage you to come and listen to his talk, which I believe is entitled Misquoting Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. You will find it to be probably a more beneficial talk than mine, and I encourage you to go ahead and attend that. So only one question? Wow. Do secular states have legitimacy? Are secular states legitimate? This is a question that I will try to answer. Obviously, from the law of the country that we live in, which is illegitimate law, in as much as if you don't follow, you're going to go to jail. Primarily speaking, without recourse to other moralistic type of discussions, it's a legitimate law according to the law of this country. Secular states are legitimate states. From a purely theoretical and rational point of view, based in the legal theory of Islam, yes, states are legitimate when they have sovereign power. What does sovereign power mean? Sovereign power doesn't mean that I'm a dude in Montana that has a ranch and a farm, and like 50 of my followers live with me and we have guns and will shoot people if they try to come onto our land. This is not sovereign power. A sovereign state is what? A state that has its own wealth, it has its own currency, it doesn't have to transact in the currency of other people, it has its own police, it has its own source of water, food, trade, all of these things that it doesn't need another state in order to exist. And it also has the physical power, the material power, the military power, in order to enforce its own grid within its own boundaries without having to be dependent on another state. And in the Islamic law, in the traditional, let's just say, rather than traditional, let's say the law of, not the law, the political theory of Islam that is based in late antiquity. So late antiquity is what? Around the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Which is, it describes a world that really doesn't exist anymore. But in those theoretical original discussions, the Muslim political theorists divided polity into Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. That there is a place where Islam, as a religious theocratic state, has rule. And this is an interesting thing. If you read, I think it's Pew, or I forget who is the one who carried out the study, but they did a study across something like 30-something different countries in the Muslim world, and they saw what people's opinions were. Muslims, by and large, are still in favor of theocratic rule. That is because of a number of things. One is that we never had an inquisition that caused people to have to believe things like the earth revolves around, the sun revolves around the earth, or that the earth is the center of the universe, or the world is 5,000 years old, or etc. If someone holds those beliefs, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm saying that these are problematic for people in modernity in order to accept. So people will not be comfortable entrusting the powers of state in the hands of people who hold such beliefs. It's, I'm not meaning to offend people, but it's a fact that must be accepted. We never really had these types of things. We have in our law a very, I think, pragmatic and by and large a successful way of having a theocratic state that has religious minorities integrated into that state in a way that people function relatively happily. The Ottoman state being a very like bright example of that it is a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, multi-religious state, which will be very successful for centuries. And when it falls apart, it doesn't fall apart because of sectarian issues. And it is a Sunni theocratic state. It is a state that will not fall apart because of internal strife or because of sectarian issues. Rather, national secular states that are built on nationalism are far more prone to these types of sectarian and ethnic conflicts. Places like Yugoslavia, the name itself seems to indicate that there's some sort of artificiality and forced cohesion between the groups that make up these states. That these are not really going to have a very bright future. That being said, both the classical political theorists, they considered both the Islamic state and the non-Islamic state / states to be legitimate in their own right. It is an imperative upon the Muslims to establish a state in which their laws are enforced, and that state must be established in their own lands, not in Washington State or in Missouri or in Oklahoma or all these places where they have these kind of anti-Sharia bills. It's not part of our religious mandate to establish Sharia in the lands of other people. They're to be established in the lands where you have a majority of people living there actually adhering to Islam. But that being said, our classical political theory has a number of laws that govern how a Muslim is to live in a secular state or in a state in which the theocratic laws of Islam are not enforced. The prime one of those laws, the first one is what? When you enter into another state, you enter in this treaty, an agreement that you will not break the laws of that land. You are bound by that treaty. You're bound by that agreement. If that land causes you to do something that you consider unethical or against your religion, you are bound by our sacred law to get up and leave from that place, rather than cause internal strife and disruption. So yes, secular states are legitimate, even though there is an imperative classically for people to have some place where the ethical teachings of Islam are put into practice. All right, now we have a lot of questions. Should Muslims in the West relate to their non-Muslim neighbors? The answer is yes. The respect and love of neighbors is something that's a universal religious virtue. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had for much of his life several Jewish neighbors, and he would, whenever he was, for example, slaughter an animal, because you don't get your meat from Safeway in those days, whenever he slaughtered an animal, he'd send the meat to his neighbors. Whenever he would, his neighbors would make petitions to them, he would honor that. He said that the rights of neighbors were so emphasized to me by my Lord that I feared